Hey everybody, my name is Robert. I'm here with Team Covenant at GenCon, and I am talking to Brad, who of course is the Ubermensch of the Conquest universe. Brad, how you doing?
I'm doing great. GenCon's awesome.
Okay, so the first thing that we have to ask you about is how excited are you now that the Great Devourer is finally released?
I don't even have words to express how excited I am that the Great Devourer is finally out. It's been a long haul. We've had it almost done since last year at GenCon.
Yeah.
So it's been just kind of labor of love, finally seeing it get out and be out to all the players.
Yeah, totally, man. So with that said, talk to us about what seems to be, right off the bat, kind of the raw strength of the Tyranids out of that expansion and kind of what that means for the faction as a whole.
So the raw strength of the Tyranids is going to take a little bit for players to crack.
Mm-hmm.
They're way different than any other faction in the game. They do almost everything their own special little way. From having a synapse unit, that second warlord, they get to move around from starting with less resources and kind of starting off, if you will, hungry for conquering planets and getting out there and winning command struggles. Players are going to need a while to adjust how they're playing, so I think the real strength of the Tyranids is going to take a while to show itself.
Okay. And is that strength something that is learned, or is that something that will just kind of be manifested as more releases come out?
So I think some of both.
Okay.
There's some really exciting stuff for Tyranids coming, which I wish I could tell you guys about, but it's coming, I swear. There's awesome stuff down the line. Not that the Great Devourer is not awesome. There's just so much evolution we can put forward for the Tyranids, and so much design space we have to move forward with them. As far as the kind of just natural tendencies, Tyranids have that animalistic, primitive, but also advanced kind of idea built into them.
Yeah.
So players are going to find a lot of their power level just kind of like throwing some Tyranids cards together and seeing what happens. So it's I'm so excited.
That's excellent. You mentioned earlier that the Tyranids are hungry. Kind of speaking to that hunger, we don't really see much in the way of economic tools for the Tyranids. And then what's more is they have only 6 cards and 6 resources for the warlords that we start with. Is this something to kind of counterbalance their raw strength, or even being an indicator of strategies that players should try to adopt?
So it's part of the indicator of raw strength. Starting with another warlord-like unit on the board right off the bat, huge advantage. If you think about it, you're paying a card and 1 resource for your synapse unit. So if you compare every synapse unit to a 1-cost unit, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how good they are.
Yeah.
But the fewer cards to start does mess with your start a little bit. Tyranids are lacking a little bit in the way of economic options. And it's all to generate that sense of hunger. You want to win those command struggles. You want to be moving forward, churning through, and just staying ahead of your opponent.
Yeah, man.
I think that answers your question.
I very much think it does. So when you are designing pretty much any other faction for the game, how does it compare to the Tyranids in the sense of every other faction only has 2 options of who they can splash to, but the Tyranids have none?
So the big thing with designing Tyranids is exactly what you said. Is you can't rely on being able to borrow from anyone else. So one interesting thing that you'll see in the Tyranids box is that you'll see Tyranids almost get versions of other people's cards. They'll have, for example, the Venom Throw Polluter.
What's that one? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
I believe that's one that was previewed on a podcast.
Okay.
And it works very, very similar to the way Eldar card.
I wish I could help you.
I'm so frazzled from so many tournaments.
Sure, man.
But he gets an extra resource and card when you win command struggles.
Okay.
Excuse me for not remembering the name.
No worries.
I do apologize. But they get their own version for infested planets.
Sure.
That really functions in their way of accelerating. But they got to do it in a Tyranid way. And that's all that they're about, is everything they do in their own Tyranid fashion, and that makes them their own thing.
That's awesome. You mentioned synapse units a little bit ago. Is that a type of unit that we can see or expect to be expanded upon, or is this the kind of static thing, much like the planets in the Traxxas sector, that it's like you only get so many and then they're going to have to adapt to whatever it is you're doing?
You're going to expect to see more Synapse units.
That's awesome.
They're a great customizable element that'll keep the Tyranids fresh and exciting. And in my opinion, they're almost as exciting as getting a new Warlord for the Tyranids. So definitely expect to see some more of those guys. They're too much fun to design not to.
I can't help but agree there. So when it comes time, like design work is done and it's time to play or even just play test the Tyranids, how do you go about like validating whatever your design concepts were and seeing them in action? Because again, like with the other factions, there's no real faction that you can fairly foil them against due to splashing concerns and all this kind of stuff. So how do you approach just the play itself?
So I have to be honest, Tyranids took a lot of time in play testing just to make sure they were just right. It's so much of just like smashing Tyranids against every single faction we can to get a sense of where their power level is.
Yeah.
With other factions, it's a little more smooth, that transition that you see in between the factions, and like, well, this card is good, but by giving it to Eldar, we're also giving it to Dark Eldar and Tau, and that's going to smooth out how that power curve is. But every single Tyranid card requires a lot of testing. So much goes into every card because it has to stand with the Tyranids together.
Well, that's awesome. And then the last question to just round out the Tyranids, what do you recommend to players in terms of what they should expect and how they should adapt now that Tyranids are in the meta?
Well, one of the design principles we took into Tyranids is that they're going to be the masters of the swarm. You've seen Swarm with Orcs, you've seen Swords, you've seen Swarms with Dark Eldar, and you've seen some Swarms with Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, if you will. Look out for Tyranids, because they're going to be bringing the Swarm hard with their token units, and they're going to be able to use their token units in more ways than others. You see stuff like Clogged with Corpses, being able to destroy support cards, something that players have been wanting for a while, and other ways like Hive Mind to really make their token units the best token units on the board.
Totally.
So you're going to see that strategy come out of them, and factions that are a little weaker against that swarm will be affected
disproportionately
because of that. But other end of the spectrum, with Old One Eye, Tyranids have a mean, aggressive game as well. Just getting in there and beating face. So, man, it's kind of a whole new day for the whole meta. Really so I'm really excited to see how stuff shakes out.
That's awesome. And just to kind of speak to the game in general, irrespective of Tyranids, what do you think is happening with the game now, and what are you wanting to do with the game in terms of moving it forward, balancing factions out, and all that kind of stuff?
So one of my biggest objectives moving forward is trying to spread out the cost curve and get those higher cost units to be more effective in the game. It's a mission of mine.
Those elite units?
Yes, the elite units in particular. We traded them with a purpose, starting with the core set, because we wanted them to feel special and good, and I don't think we've quite lived up to that to this point.
Sure.
But we're going to be working really hard to make that happen and make sure that the whole cost curve is represented in the game.
Yeah, that's excellent. And given what happened with the Conquest tournament at GenCon, did everything kind of play out as you were hoping, or did you learn some things with the way things went down?
You know, the Conquest Nationals at GenCon was an amazing tournament. We had every faction represented in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Most of the warlords in the game showed up. The top 8 and the top 16 were incredibly diverse, with so many different factions represented. We had some factions that players generally have thought of as weaker showing up. Nazdrag in the top 8.
Right.
So I think the game is still not solved. The meta is still rich and amazing. Game's really well balanced. I mean, I'm super happy with how this stuff turned out. Nothing was too surprising from all the regionals reports we've gotten in. You know, the game's still anyone's game.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
No problem.
Those are some fantastic insights. We really appreciate what you do for the game and just the community at large. So
well, we
thanks so much.
What you guys do too.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you, man. So there you have it, guys. That's Brad. We're here at GenCon, of course, and we will have more coming to you guys just as soon as we can. See ya.